Well, hiya mates. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror themed, etc. And my favorite music, mostly metal. And we are going to continue the epic movie that I just did a video on called Night Watch. We are going to continue with its direct sequel that picks up right where it left off, called Daywatch. Daywatch unrated. So, like I said, what's one of the interesting things about this movie is that it wasn't filmed back to back, like Hunger Games, part 3 and 4. Um, it wasn't. They weren't filmed back to back. This movie was filmed in 2006. So Night Watch was 2004. Day Watch is 2006. And one of the interesting things about it is that every single character in the first one that lived um, came back, is in this movie. I just thought that was neat because you've seen sequels, even sequels that were close together, where contractual obligations, deaths, contract negotiations, whatever, that people don't come back. And I thought that it was very neat that every single person, and you can tell they were filmed 2 years apart, especially with, Igor, who was noticeably no longer 12. I don't know how old he was when he filmed it, Night Watch, but he is definitely taller and older, a couple of years older. He looks about 14 or 15 in this movie, whereas he definitely looked 12 in the last one. So I just thought that was neat that every single member of the cast came back for this movie. So I thought that was cool. But it's directed by Timur Bekmambetov. I'm going to do that again, aren't I? Konstantin Khabenskiy, Mariya, Poroshina, and Vladimir Menshov. So enjoy that butcher. But so yeah, 2006, rated R, almost 2.5 hours long, the unrated version. And yeah, so we are going to talk about that. And like I said, it picks up right where the last one left off, where Igor had chosen the dark. This movie begins with another narration which recaps the events of the last movie, and sort of recaps the world of the others, and it also does fill you in with one last piece of the world building or prophecy that you didn't know from the last movie, and that is that there was this thing called the Chalk of Fate. And at first I was like, what are they saying? Chalk? Chalk? Like chalk? What is a chalk? I kind of, at first I thought, you mean like the Holy Grail or something? I thought, they can't be talking about a piece of chalk, right? That you write, the teacher, writes on a school board. That's exactly what the fuck it is. And I'm like, that's weird. A piece of chalk is a magical thing. That's kind of neat. But so the Chalk of Fate is, held by these priests, of course, of the others, who keep watch over it. And this warrior named Tamerlane had did a gigantic battle to get a hold of it, and supposedly he did manage to get in. They showed all of this, of course, managed to get a hold of the Chalk of Fate, and it was lost to time. Well, the Chalk of Fate is the only thing that can stop the apocalypse. Remember, the prophecy from the first movie was that the two great ones, the two great others, if they ever met in battle, would cause the apocalypse. And that's kind of what the Dark has been trying to get to happen, which is why he went through that entire first movie. We found out at the end was a gigantic setup to get that great Ubba on the dark half, on the dark side, which was the boy, Igor. And that's exactly, it worked because he chose the dark. So this movie opens after it, gives you that narration, gives you that backstory about the Chalk of Fate. We move on to see Anton and Svetlana. Svetlana, the other great other, remember the one that caused the vortex, that was the cursed woman. Well, now she, of course, is no longer cursed. She has chosen a side, which is light, and she is now working on the night. She is a trainee. She's sort of like a rookie cop. She is a trainee on the night watch, and with Anton and Olga and the other two shapeshifters who are also back. I can't remember that girl. She turns into a leopard. The guy they call Bear, because he can turn into a bear. The other one turns into a leopard. They show that a couple times. But so she's on that night watch team, and of course the Dark is plotting as usual. Now it's a couple of years later, and the boy is reaching his prime powers. So they get a radio call, just like the police. It's weird how they're just like the police, but they get like a radio call that somebody has been attacking old elderly people, elderly women, and they show this elderly woman get attacked, and it was like this, it looked like a big giant acupuncture needle or something. It was huge, and this person like walks up behind them and stabs them, and then it sucks a huge amount of blood out of them, and he puts it in like, wow, like those juice cups that you stick the straw in and drink juice, and that's what he does with the blood that he gets from them. And so they show up where this elderly lady is being attacked, and they start chasing the perpetrator. And Svetlana, she's all in it, and Anton is like screaming at her, "What the hell are you doing?" And she ends up chasing the boy into the gloom. I just gave it away, didn't I? She ends up chasing the perpetrator into the gloom, where Anton can't even go that far because the gloom has like phases, and like levels, and she was able to go on to level 2 where the perpetrator was, but Anton couldn't get through that. He's not powerful enough. But as they're in there, she sees that he can't come, any further, and he starts begging her to come back, and she starts coming back, and the perpetrator, comes up behind her and stabs her and gets a bunch of her blood and then takes off. But she manages to turn around and pull his ski mask off, and it's Igor. It's the boy. So he's been going around stabbing old ladies and drinking their blood. Okay, guess he really did go dark, didn't he? So of course Anton is freaked out because that's his son, whom he has not spoken to since the last movie, because he betrayed him by choosing the dark instead of the light, and so they're not getting along, and the boy is like whatever, because he's staying with the leader of the dark, who he now refers to as Uncle Zov, and and that's who's raised him, has been, the leader of the dark. So Anton gets a phone call. I'm not even having to use my notes, am I? So Anton gets a phone call from the dark, from the assistant of the leader of the dark, that evidence, that evidence she ripped off that ski mask, that evidence of his violation of the rules, because what he was doing, as we discussed the rules in the last video, one of the rules was not to attack humans and become known, you know what I mean? And he had violated that rule, and so since Anton is part of the police force, right, they call him and say, there's evidence left when she had pulled that ski mask off that not only humans, but their own police force, there are people over them, and that is the tribunal. So if the tribunal finds out that the boy has violated, you see what I mean, he's going to be in trouble, and that will screw up the dark leader's plans. So it turns out that the dark leader is still subordinate to the tribunal, and so is the leader of the light. So even though they are the top dogs of the two sides, they still have a group, a power, an authority over them. And so they tell Anton that, he's got to save his son by going and stealing the evidence, from the council's, like the city clerk, but it's for the others, their world. So their world kind of mirrors the human world, and so there's a repository where evidence is kept by the tribunal against light or dark others who have violated the rules, and they can dish out punishment. Olga, in the last movie, she had been punished for 60 years for violating a rule, and had been turned into an owl, and that's how she became Anton's partner in the first movie. Was she was finally released from her punishment of being an owl, a hunting owl, and allowed to turn back into a human. So yeah, that's sort of like his mission, is to go and get that evidence back that proves his son had violated the other's rule. So that's a little subplot that's going on there. Meanwhile, of course, the boy's birthday is coming up, and that's kind of the way they put it. Now, the next thing that occurs of major, because once again, I'm going to leave a whole lot out, but another major thing that occurs is that one of the assistants of the leader of the dark is murdered. The others can be killed too. They can be killed like anyone else can be killed. But of course it takes a little bit more to kill another. But she was killed and completely drained of her life force. And it was blamed on Anton. You have to watch the movie, but the evidence and everything was planted and situated to make it look like Anton had done it. So they're trying to set him up as a criminal in front of the tribunal by, killing a dark other, because he had just barely got his ass out of that where he killed the vampire in the first movie. Now here he is being accused of killing a dark other again. So he's dealing with that, while at the same time he has heard about this chalk of fate, and he has begun researching it and trying to figure out where it is, because he knows what Svetlana and his son he knows the prophecy and what can happen if they end up in battle. Svetlana doesn't know it, but he does. And the boy doesn't know it either yet, but he does. So Anton is also kind of like this myth about this chalk of fate. He is seeking that. He's researching it. Where could this tomb be of Tamerlane? How can he get to it? Meanwhile, he's being set up by the dark side to be blamed for these murders. And then a second murder occurs that he is also, going to be blamed for, while he, at the same time, is trying to find this damn chalk so that he can help stop the apocalypse if it comes, which the light side knows that the dark side is trying to make this happen. So this is sort of like the ultimate weapon if he can find it, but he's being stymied because he's being framed for these murders. Dark. So one of the ways that they decided, and this is a pretty funny part of the movie, without Anton's knowledge, Olga does know. They trick him into going and seeing the leader of the light, and trick him into sitting down next to Olga. And then he uses his powers and he switches their bodies. So that part of the movie you really have to follow, because now Olga is still Olga, but her body is still Olga, but Anton is in her body and she is in his. So needless to say, some funny things happen between that. Now Anton does use this little thing to one of the things he uses it for was he goes and spends the night at Svetlana's. Now he's secretly in love with her, and she is like thinking she's talking to Olga, and Olga asks her certain questions, like what do you think of Anton and stuff like that, trying to get a vibe about how she may feel about him. And it turns out, she ends up saying that she loves him, which makes him damn near wreck the car and kill both of them, and goes back to her apartment. And while they're there, she's like goes and takes a shower, and Olga, can you bring me a towel? And this is Anton in her body, right? So Olga finally breaks down. Finally breaks down and tells her, I'm not really Olga. I'm Anton. I'm in Anton's body. And he does that, handing her a towel while she's naked in the shower. So you can imagine her reaction. Olga's, what's wrong with you? Are you all right? And Olga's like, I'm not really Olga. It's me, Anton. Gezer switched our bodies to hide me so that I can continue my mission without them catching me and arresting me and stuff like that. And she's standing there buck naked like, really, this is the time? And I kind of thought that too. I'm like, dude, couldn't you wait till she like got dressed and was sitting down eating popcorn in front of a movie? I mean, I don't think that the appropriate time to tell someone that, that. It's like, so that was really funny, but it did make me go, wait a second, if someone's going to tell me that, they're a different person, especially a person I'm in love with, don't do it while I'm standing there naked in the shower staring at you going, can you hand me that towel, please? Sure, here you go. And by the way, I'm really that guy in the girl's body, and so that was a funny scene. So he uses this time hiding in Olga to try to get to that thing, and Olga's like, who is actually Anton, um, is like, well, I'm going with you. You know, what I mean, you're not going to do this by yourself. So they end up on a plane going, where Olga finally breaks down and tells him something, and because she's now figured out what he's up to, and when she finds it out, she tells him that, you know what, I got a little bit of info for you. Okay. Back when I was imprisoned in the body of an owl for 50, 60 years, 1942. Do you know what I was punished for? That punishment of turning me into an owl for 60 years until they let me out to be your partner? It was because I went looking for the hand of fate. And I didn't find it there. But I did find it elsewhere. And I used it to try to correct a mistake. Because it turns out what the chalk of fate does, its power, is that if you go and write with the chalk something that you want to change, like bring my husband back or whatever, it will do it. So she had tried it. It didn't work out right. She got caught. The chalk got returned to wherever it is now. And she doesn't know. And she got punished by being turned into an owl and not allowed to transform back to a human for 60 years. That was her punishment. So he asked her, I was like, well, what did you find when you were in that tomb? And she's like, well, it wasn't, because the prophecy or the mythology always said that it was in his right hand and he was buried with his hand clenched. And that was what was in it, was that chalk. Because he was a right-hand man. Now, when she said that, he remembered, or he thought, well, shit, I know where it's at then. Because he knows this immortal, the others can stay immortal unless they're killed, like those two that have been killed that he's being framed for. The actual guardian, way back when Tamerlane stole the chalk of fate, he actually knows him. He's like a chef at the restaurant he eats at all the time. He's an other. And so he's like, that motherfucker's got it. So he goes, they turn the plane around, he goes back, and he actually gets the chalk. And the guy freely gives it to him. Because, it's often like that in mythology, and that is, I'm not really trying to keep it from you. If you're going to do something stupid or whatever, go ahead. So he gave him the chalk, and what Anton did with it was he wrote about his son to make all of that, to make his son have him back and be with him and not be on the dark side. And it worked. All of a sudden he flashed into another reality, and everything was fine, and he was, with his son and stuff like that. And I'll be damned if they still couldn't get along. And it all fell apart again, which is a little piece of the movie. And when he asked the guy, why didn't it work? The guy says, you can't change anyone's fate but your own. Yes, it's called the chalk of fate. But if you're trying to change someone else's fate, it doesn't work that way. So you tried to change Igor's fate, and you can't change his fate. That's why it didn't work out. And anything that you do like that is not going to work out. Which is why it didn't work out when Olga tried it. She tried to help someone. You can only help yourself. Something that is about you, your fate. You can't change someone else's. So he's like, oh shit, well, that didn't work out well. So, meanwhile, the party is coming where they are going to end up having to um, the Dark, are going to throw this big party for Igor. Igor. I keep wanting to call it Igor like in Frankenstein, but it's not Igor. But so they're going to, have this gigantic party, and Anton knows that what they're doing is trying to bring about the apocalypse. So he starts trying to find a way there. Meanwhile, though, remember, they are still after him, right? For these murders. He's being set up. And that's because the Lord of Dark knows that he's probably the one that can stop this shit if it's going to be stopped. So he's sort of like a threat. And that's why he's being set up. But he manages to elude them in good superhero fashion. And they're all trying to get to this party. And so is Svetlana. She's going to this party too. Because, nobody knows where Anton is. Except the boss. Now, he ends up, before going, him and Olga switch their bodies back. So they're back in their correct bodies now. And he's being pursued. They start a gigantic... They do manage to catch him. They trick him and they catch him. And they try to arrest him. The Day Watch tries to arrest him. The Night Watch handles dark violators, and the Day Watch handles light violators, and he is light, so it's the Day Watch that's after him. So the Day Watch, they do manage to arrest him, but Svetlanka, who is so powerful, she intervenes and allows him to get away and causes this huge, devastating clash of the Titans between her and the Lord of Dark. And so that's pretty cool scenes. So he is free. He manages to get away to get to this party where he knows they're up to some shit. However, the Lord of Dark has already made it back. He knows he's coming. He gets there. They end up like drugging him, and not like, drugging him. I started to say poisoning him, but it wasn't. They weren't trying to kill him or anything. They just wanted him tripping out of his mind, and he did. He tripped balls all over that party. Okay, I mean, he was it's like a super LSD trip, and the sun is there. The sun comes out, and he really plays a good evil character. The kid who plays, Igor, and Igor has become a dark motherfucker. I mean, he is a bad. He wants to bring about the apocalypse, just like his uncle does, and so he has went pretty dark. So he ends up, going to fight Svenlaka, but when she shows up, but she refuses. Now, this whole time, the tribunal shows up, and this character I hadn't even talked about named Alyssa, there were some badass scenes with her, like driving on the side of a building with this special, she can like violate the laws of physics is her gift. But like I told you, I was leaving a lot out of the way these things will be as long as the movie. But so while they're there, he, even in his drugged out tripping ball state, he manages to figure out who the real murderer was and announces it at the party, and the tribunal does show up, and they punish, take the murderer away to punish it. And then a real sad thing happens. I haven't really talked about him, but in the first video I talked about my crush of this movie was the vampire that lived next door. It was his dad that was the real murderer, who had been helping set up Anton. And he had done it because he wanted, he was just so angry about wanting his son to be human again. I don't know if there's a way to do that or anything. Maybe some other could do it. I don't know. They didn't never say, but that was his thing. Was he was so upset about his son being a vampire that I guess maybe someone had falsely promised him, probably the dark, right? They had falsely promised him that they could help make his son human again, and that's why he had did it. So he was taken away, but the son got so angry about that he attacked the Lord of the Dark, who promptly killed him. And I was like, fuck you. This is the one time that I thought my movie crush would not get killed in a movie, but it's nope, I'm still waiting on that day to come. Because if I like someone in a movie, they get killed. So it held true. But that was a really cool scene. So now we're down to brass tacks, and that is that Svetlana has arrived at the party. Igor has seen her, so now the prophecy is complete because the two great others have met. They're in the same room. And what would start the apocalypse is if Svetlana, if one of the great others shed one drop of blood from the other, the apocalypse would be able to come into fruition. So Igor, who's a crafty little bitch, manages to get Svetlana to knock the shit out of him. And he flies across the room, and that one little drop of blood comes out of his nose and lands on the floor, which allows everyone to go apeshit. And it also does this mystical thing that allows the prophecy to be fulfilled because that was part of it. So I don't know what the hell this kid used. It looked like a yo-yo. It looked like a hacky sack. If you know what a hacky sack is, it's like this little soft ball. But he was using it he could use it like a yo-yo. And once that occurred, it was like he had been given permission to engage the apocalypse. And that was one of the most coolest scenes I think I've ever seen in any movie. And that was, he used this bag and threw it at Svetlana. And when the bag was going through the air, it opened up. And these other little bags came out of it, and then those bags opened up. And it was like shotgun pellets, but a little bit bigger. And there was billions of them just went through the entire city. It was it's hard to explain. It was like meteorites, little tiny meteorites going through. They were just destroying entire buildings, and of course the entire city was screaming and running in panic, and you had these billions and billions and billions of little tiny going at supersonic speed through people, through walls, through buildings, through cars. It was an amazing. I don't know how they did that. It was an amazing. Was it? Well, it had to be CGI, didn't it? But it was damn good CGI. I can't tell it was CGI. It was phenomenal. And so you've got this going on. Everybody everybody and all buildings, everything is being destroyed by these billions upon billions of supersonic speed little bitty BB looking things like shotgun pellets. And Anton manages to get the Chalk of Fate back from Alyssa, who was trying to use it to bring the vampire boy next door, who is dead now, back to life. He manages to get it from her. And the guy, because he has figured out, thinking about it, he has figured out how he could use this to stop all this. Remember, the rule is, the magic of this thing is you can change your own fate. It's got to be something that you did. It's got to be something that has nothing to do with anybody as far as the actual act except you. You can't, stop that person from getting into a car that got into a car wreck. You can't stop that. That's their fate. But did you do something? He realized that this whole setup, that both of these movies, that this whole thing was the prophecy. This whole thing, from being accused of these murders in this movie, so that Igor could enact the apocalypse, so that he would choose the dark half in the first movie. This whole thing was all because of what? Even the little bits that I've told you in these two videos, this whole thing came about because they got this great one, this great Eva, from him. And the reason they got it from him was because of what? He had tried to abort the baby during the first 10 minutes of the first movie. And so he is the only one that could stop this by changing this whole timeline, by not doing that, by not saying yes when she said, "Are you willing to pay that price? I'm going to abort the baby and I will get you your girlfriend back." That was the moment that caused this entire timeline. So, since nobody had anything to do with it but him, that was his fate, he went to the witch, he asked for this, he made the deal, he agreed to it, it started all of this in motion. So, since that woman's apartment building, the wall, it had been torn down, but the wall of the room where it happened in still existed, he knew if he could take that chalk and manage to get back there without getting killed, that he could write it on the wall and use the chalk of fate to change his fate, which would stop this whole timeline. And that's what he did. Of course, there were marvelous battles trying to get it because, you've got the entire MCU down on your head trying to, the dark half, is trying to let this apocalypse rage. The light's trying to stop it, and everybody's trying to stop him. But he manages to do it. He manages to get back to his apartment, that apartment where he had made that deal. He wrote it on the wall, and click, bam, boom. Everything is stopped. The timeline is reversed, and it sort of circles back to the first 10 minutes of the first movie, and it shows him walk in to the witch's room, and her say that stuff that she did, and he, instead of saying, okay, he says no, and walks out. He says, "No, I'll take care of it myself," and walks out. So, you get to see a bunch of the others that have starred in this movie, like the two, the Lord of Dark and the Lord of Lights, are sitting at this on a bench while he walks by. Even the witch, when he walked out of the room, she's like, well, that was fun. They all, in other words, they all could remember the timeline that had just happened. He didn't, because it was his his fate that changed, but they all still remembered it. So they were watching him, and they watched Svetlana walk by, and they watched him walk by her and not recognize her, and then they were like, betting on whether he would recognize her or not. And he did, and he turned around and started talking to her and walking off. So his girlfriend went on to do whatever. The boy, the great other, he's going to be born. But the prophecy, you see, is moot because it didn't happen, it wasn't set in motion. Maybe it'll be set in motion with the next great one that was born, because there are great ones born. So it doesn't mean that it'll never happen. It just meant it happening this time didn't happen because that kid, he's still an other. His son, that, who knows what's going to happen. That was probably what was going to be in the trilogy, was like, what were they going to do now? But, so the kid's going to be born, but he's not going to have that trauma. That his dad didn't try to kill him. The girlfriend, I guess, would have stayed with her boyfriend and had him. Maybe he'd have been raised by somebody else. Who knows where the story would have went. But the point is, he used the chalk of fate. He changed the timeline. He saved the world. And that's where the movie ended. The others let him go about his business. Whether he finds out that he's an other or not, who knows. Like I said, they haven't done the third one yet. They're still talking about it, but they haven't done the third one yet. Like with all other directors, they think they live forever. I'm like, how much time you think you got, right? This was released in 2006. So, if you're going to make a trilogy, you should probably do it. But you don't really have to because you heard the way this one ended, and it still left you with plenty of imagination fuel. Now, like I said, I left a huge amount out of this movie. There are so many cool scenes. There's so much world building. There are so many little subplots that you would have to see for yourself. But if you are a fan of this type of horror, that being Underworld, if you're a fan of Underworld and that kind of horror, horror fantasy, you would definitely love this movie. And it's 2006, Day Watch, unrated, easy to find on eBay. I think, well, it was when I found them anyway. But yeah, very, very cool. Who is that? That's Elisa. That's Anton. That's Svetlana. But yeah, so 2006, Day Watch, unrated, really fantastic, epic movie. Like I said, if you're a fan of the underworld type stuff, great special effects, really great special effects. That ending apocalypse scene with all of the pellets, that, wow, no giant fireball or anything. See, a lot of this movie was really unique. I mean, an apocalypse of billions and billions of supersonic flying pellets. Who would have thought of that? I mean, it's not the typical meteor crashing into the earth or, blowing up the planet. It was literally supersonic pellets. That's pretty cool. Silver pellets, like little tiny silver BBs. Yeah, it was really cool. So, yeah, I really loved it. I love Day Watch. I love Night Watch. I think they're a fantastic movie. I definitely agree with Quentin Tarantino that both of these movies are just epic in every way possible. And yeah, you should check them out. If you have, let me know what you think about them. If you haven't, I urge you to try to see if you can find them. And I will talk to you in the next visit. I will visit you in the next video. Love you, miss you, bye. Always remember, you're a very special person, no matter what anybody does, says, or thinks about it. You're the only one who matters. And always support indie horror, please. That is my thing, indie horror. Support it, love it, buy it. in any, however you can support it, support it. And I will see you in the next video. I'm trying not to make these so gigantically long, but I just can't shut the fuck up. And I will see you in the next one. Bye bye. Day watch. Yes. I'm really having. Okay, I couldn't find the stop button actually. I love my bloopers.